In this video, I'm going to be covering the basics of Excel for business analysts. Note that these are pretty much the bare minimums for a business analyst. Every BA should be expected to be able to do this. This is very basic and generic level analysis activities. One thing I'd like to note is that this data is not something that I got from my company. This data is publicly available. And if you are wanting to practice Excel, or maybe you want to input some information into a database to practice some database skills and techniques, there is lots of publicly available data out there. I actually just went to data.gov, went to the most viewed data sets, and just picked from the number one data set, and I downloaded it and kind of looked it over to see how I could move things around to best talk about these functionalities. So if you're looking for data, that's data.gov. Find some data sets, download them, play around with them, and see what you could do. Another important thing to mention is that it doesn't matter which tool you're using. The more important thing is that you remember that these tools are capable of doing these things. More than likely, you're not going to remember every step I go through while going through this video. And things may change as well over time, depending on when you're watching this video. But if you understand that the tools can do these things, you can at minimum look up how to do them again, and then you can do your analysis work faster and be more efficient as a business analyst. If we look at my file, you can see I have two different sheets. I actually broke up the information that was available at data.gov to kind of better illustrate the types of functionalities that you need to be able to execute as a BA. All of this information was originally kind of together in one big table, but I broke it up because if you were getting this information in the real world, it may not come together, and these features and functionalities are really to help you put it together so you can make sense of what you're looking at. In this case, I got registration information. So if you look at this data, this is essentially the individual who registered it, or at least the unique vehicle that was registered, where it was registered, and then the model and year number. And then here would be like if you were to get information from just like a vehicle information database. So the make, model, what kind of car type it is. In this case, we're only dealing with electric vehicles, so these are either electric, plug-in, hybrid, etc. And then maybe the vehicle range. And there might be a database where that information exists separately from vehicle registration data. And so those are the two kind of data sets that we're playing with: generic vehicle data, and then vehicle registration data that of like a local government. So the first kind of set of functionalities I want to cover is what I call the ifs. If you look at Excel, Excel does make it easy to do a lot of things really quickly. So if we look at these rows here, or these columns rather, if I just hover over one, it's going to give me some information right away. So if we look down here at the bottom, you can see the average, the count, and the sum. And so that's, if you added all these numbers together, this is the number you'll get. Obviously these are years, so that's not necessarily valuable. A count, so I immediately know that there's about 130,000 rows here, as well as an average. So the average model year is 2019. And so I can get that right away without having to know any functionalities. And all I've done is hovered over the column. So same here, the count obviously should be similar. It is important to note that it doesn't count blanks. So that's really what the count is, all the non-blank rows that are available. So there's a few less here for some reason versus model years, which means there's some blanks in the data somewhere, but that's okay. That's not relevant to what we need to accomplish. Okay, so let's talk about the ifs. This is kind of, basic analysis 101. We've looked at the total numbers, but what if I just want to count or an average or a sum of a specific value, right? So if I just wanted to know how many rows are 2018 versus 2017 or whatever, the quickest way I could do that, if I add filters up here, is to click the filter, find that value. And so in this case, I said 2018. So if I go to find 2018, I can apply the filter, and then it's going to give me a count down at the bottom of essentially what that filtered down to, which is a quick way if I want to know just 2018. But if I want to get the numbers for all of them fairly quickly, then I have to go through each one of these. It'd be kind of tedious, and I gotta scroll down. So what I could do instead is, let's say I wanted to get a count of everything that's 2018. So I'm going to type in 2018 here because that's what I'm looking for. And then we're going to use the basic formula functionality here. So I'm going to find my formulas. Here it gives you kind of a shortcut of all the formulas that are available. These most recently used are really my most recently used. But as you can see, there is a ton, and I honestly don't know what many of these do. And as a business analyst, you may never need to find out. But the more you explore, the more trainings you get on Excel, the more powerful you can become at the tool. But back to what we're focused on, the CountIF. And so if we go here, we select the CountIF, and we go ahead and insert the function. In this case, because I'm using this row or this column as kind of my reference, I'm going to point at that. So the range that I'm really wanting to count is this model year. So the range is like all of the cells that you want to count. So I'm going to just select the whole row, or column rather, for my range. And then for the criteria, I really want it to be 2018. I could input 2018 right here, but to make it more efficient, I really want to say, I want you to use this column. So anytime in this range where this number is equal to what's in this column, I want you to count it. And so I'm going to go ahead and say done. And so for the model year 2018, there's about 14,000 vehicles. Okay, so for 2018, we have about 14,000. But I want to know 2019, 2020, etc. So I can go here, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. And I think I have this as a general. If I had it listed as a number, I could have just selected this right here and went down, and it would have auto-populated. Oops, 2022. But that's okay. We missed that shortcut. And then now I can go to this, and rather than having to recreate that formula, I'm essentially going to copy the formula down. So instead of referencing 2018, it comes down and it references the next one down. So 2019 and on and on and on. And now I can see how many cars are in 2019, 20, 21, and 22. So that's a CountIF. Similar to the sum and average. Unfortunately, my data set here doesn't really have numbers that are super valuable for an average, right? There's no point in averaging the model year for the year 2018 because the average is going to come out to be 2018. But if, say, you were selling something and at different rates, and maybe you wanted to understand, what's the average of, a particular product, or maybe a particular demographic, or whatever it may be, you can use that quick CountIF or SumIf or AverageIf. And you're really just saying, hey, give me an average, but only if this is true about the value. So I'm going to actually clear this and show it in a slightly different way. And so that was if I wanted to show it right here on the screen. In our case, I actually have another table with all of these vehicles. So maybe rather than creating my own new table, I say, hey, how about I just count here, right? And I create a count. So I can create a new column here. I'm going to call it count. And I want to know the count of these model numbers, right? So again, I can go to my CountIF. I can insert the function, the range that I want to count. So the range is actually over on the other table. So I'm on this sheet. I can go back to this sheet, click this model number, and that's the range I want to look at. And the criteria is this model name. So I'm going to just go ahead and select it, hit done, and it auto-populates. So now I know I have a count of each one of these vehicles and how often they essentially come up in the Washington State Electric Vehicle Database. So that's count. Again, you could do this similar with average or sum. In this case, this data is just not great for averaging or summing, but likewise, I could say sum or average all the information that falls within this criteria. So next, let's talk about a VLOOKUP. A VLOOKUP is a way to marry information to make it a little bit easier for you to understand the information and maybe do something valuable with that information. So in this case, I'm looking at this vehicle registration information. So these are all the registrations in the state by model number. One thing that's not available in this data set is the vehicle range. And that vehicle range is used to determine a few other things about this vehicle's registration, right? And so that range is here. So one way I could do it, if I wanted to do it the long way, is I could come here, I could find the range of a particular vehicle. So the Audi Q5 has a range of 23, an electric range of 23 miles. And then I come back here and I can say maybe filter on all the Audi Q5s and input 23 miles. Obviously, that would take a very long time to do that for all of the different rows. So the way to do that more quickly is via an Xlookup. An Xlookup is a somewhat new version of the VLOOKUP. It's a little bit easier to use than a VLOOKUP. And if you know how to do an Xlookup, you can accomplish everything that a VLOOKUP does. So I just recommend learning how to do the Xlookup. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're here. I want to know the electric range for all the essentially registrations in my county. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to go ahead and put EV range. That's what I'm going to call my new column. And then I'm going to do an Xlookup. So let's start the Xlookup formula. So I'm going to come here, select Xlookup, hit insert function so I can kind of start my path. The first thing I need is the lookup value. So this is what I want to compare it against. And for us, it's the model name. So I'm going to go ahead and select, I've selected this field. I'm going to hit model X. And now it's always going to look up the name model X. And then you're going to select your lookup array. And this is essentially the column that you want to reference. So in this case, it's over here in this other sheet, this other table. And obviously I'm looking up model number. So I want to match up the lookup value from the other one with the model number here. So I'm just going to select this whole column. So it's referenced. And then next it's going to ask me for my return array, right? And so that's of all of these rows, which thing do I want it to return back to this space, right? So if I go to the return space, obviously I want the EV range. That's over here in column D. So I'm going to select column D. There are a few other fields you could use here, depending on the type of lookup that you're doing. Sometimes you don't have an exact match and you maybe want to use some, what they call fuzzy logic. If you want to learn more about if not found, match mode, and search mode, when you're here, you can just click more help on this function and it'll give you a full explanation on what all of those things are, what values you could potentially put in there to maybe help clarify your search. In this case, I know I have exact matches, so I don't actually have to mess with these because the default is to find the exact match. So now that I know what I want to reference, which column I want to compare it against, and then what information I want it to return, I'm going to go ahead and hit done. And now for every row, I have the EV range for this model number. Obviously, there's a lot of ways you could use this, but it's really to marry information from one data set into another so you could have it in one place so you can begin the slice and dice. Okay, so the next type of functionality I want to talk about is an if statement. An if statement is one of the most basic ways that you could easily essentially transform information to help you gain something out of it, add a little pepper to it, to help you understand the information a little bit better, make it easier to digest with whatever it is that you need to understand. In this case, we're talking about vehicle data. And let's say we maybe have like an HOV lane or a toll lane that we want to make it free for anybody who has a vehicle that's, above a certain range, right? Above a certain electric range, right? So we're going to call this the eligibility column. And we want to know of these vehicles who's going to be eligible for this new incentive program. And we'll set the limit at 50. So for every car model who has an electric range that is greater than 50, we're going to give them this incentive. So how do we kind of get that information in here so we could slice and dice? And we can do that quickly and easily with an if statement. So if we go up to our top column or top row here, if you hit function, it opens this menu here, you hit if statement. The if statement has three segments. There's the test, so the thing you're measuring against, what you want it to show if it's true, and what you want it to show if it's false. And so in this case, our if statement is 50 mile or greater range. So ours is going to be, the test is going to be if this range is greater than 50. So we're going to say if this range is greater than 50, then we want it to be eligible. So we're just going to use the word eligible. And if it's not eligible, we could just say not eligible. And it's just that easy. So I hit done. And very quickly and easily, I can see all the vehicles that are eligible versus not eligible. If I was sending a communication, I could just filter and say, okay, for everyone who's eligible, go ahead and send out an email or send out a letter or whatever it may, send out the sticker so they can go through the toll without having to pay. And it just makes it easy to essentially slice and dice the information based off of values that are available here. You could also do nested if statements to say, if this is true, then in this, rather than having just eligible or not eligible, you could have another calculation. And if it's false, you could have a different calculation, to give you smart, intelligent information to help you slice and dice. Obviously, you should look up these functionalities on your own to learn more, dig into them, see what information is available. But as a business analyst, these functionalities will help you slice and dice information really quickly, get to answers more quickly, and you don't have to like count row by row or filter like 100 times to get each individual permutation. You just throw in the formula and you get to where you need to get. So the last thing I want to cover is a pivot table. A pivot table is one of the easiest ways to slice and dice information quickly in Excel. So I'm going to go here to insert. You can see here that this has already been created as a table. So when I come here to create a pivot table, it's already going to reference that table name that of the table that I've already created. You don't have to create a table. You can just use a range. I just find it easier because if I use a table name and I add information to this table, I don't have to go back and adjust the range. It's just going to be automatic. So let's create this pivot table. And let's just quickly see some of the things you might be able to do. And so in this case, it automatically gives you all the column names here, and that's how you can start slicing and dicing this information. So let's start with something like model year that we've talked about. It'll give you all the model years that are available in the data set. And here we might want to know how many vehicles of each model year exist. And so we can come here and go to values. So that's going to give you this additional value, another column. In this case, it decided to sum it up. So the model year is a number. Excel doesn't know that number in this case is a year. So it thought maybe the smartest way to put that information together is to just add it all together. In this case, that is not the case. We actually just want a count of how many times that model year shows up. So we can come here, click this eye icon and change that to count. And we can very quickly see the count of model years, electric vehicle model years, that exist in the data set by the model year. It's very interesting. I didn't know those electric vehicles way back then. These must be hybrids of some kind. I'm not sure. We can go back and find. Oh, actually, we don't have to go back and find out. If we want to find out which vehicles these are, we can come back here and come to the model and just add it underneath. And then now I can see exactly what vehicles these are. I didn't know these vehicles existed as EVs at that point in time. But hey, that's the purpose of creating a pivot table like this. It helps you learn information really quickly. So you can see back in 2011, the most popular electric car was a Nissan Leaf. That was one of the only cars available. But in 2012, the market went up quite a bit and added many more cars. The Volt started catching up here, and on. We've started adding more and more electric vehicles to the lineup. So it helped us very quickly see that and learn additional information. So that's kind of how a pivot table works. You could add additional rows. You could add additional columns. In this case, I don't know that there's a column that's particularly valuable. Maybe if I'd done it this way, model year, you can see how often a certain vehicle has been purchased per model year. So you can see, if we go back to the Leaf, which was one of the early ones, you can kind of see the trend of how it's grown. So over the years, people have bought more and more and more. Then it kind of started to trail off down here. And we could probably guess that that's due to the fact that many more cars became available on the market. But I can very quickly slice and dice that information. So it allows me to essentially provide information, decision-making information to stakeholders very quickly, whatever it might be. So maybe we want to understand if we say, hey, we're going to ban all Audi e-trons, how many cars are we really talking about? How many angry customers or how many angry residents will there be? In this case, we know there'll be 884. Or if we were to say, we're only going to allow a certain incentive for vehicles past 2018, then again, you can come back here and see, okay, if we do it by that, let's get rid of model. If we do it that way, This is the number beyond 2018. You could add filters as well. So here we're talking about model year. So if I added model year as a filter, this is showing all. I can, deselect and say just include, from 2021 onward, right? And I can get those counts. And it got rid of, so we go to models just so we can get some information. So I've filtered based off of model year, and I can see all the models there. So it allows me to slice and dice really quickly without making a bunch of fancy functions. There's a lot of different things you can do, and I highly recommend jumping in here, creating a pivot table, and just playing around with the data and seeing how different ways of manipulating it can create value while you're looking at the information. So that was my brief rundown of the most basic valuable things that a BA should be able to do in Microsoft Excel. And those are the ifs, so a CountIF, average if, sum if, a lookup. In this case, I went with an Xlookup. VLOOKUP is the alternative, but I recommend sticking with Xlookup. And finally, being able to create a pivot table to really be able to slice and dice information in whatever way you need quickly and easily so you can answer questions and provide valuable insight right away. Hey, if you found that video useful, let me know by giving me a thumbs up. If you have any additional questions about this video or BA work in general, let me know in the comments and I'll either answer you there or create a whole new video to answer your questions. So subscribe to see your questions get answered. And if you'd like something a little bit more comprehensive to help you step up your resume, be a little bit more confident in your BA interviews, and be a standout BA candidate, check out the link in the descriptions for some additional training opportunities. And as always, thanks for watching.